Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast, sponsored by the IBCA. We are a global podcast that shares the passion for the coaching profession. You will hear the stories of coaches from all around the world. We are covering the profession in game, outside of the game, and anything in between. As always, thank you for listening. We look forward to sharing the coaches' stories with you. All right, on today's episode, we have Ben Berg, head girls basketball coach at Carmel. We're going to still call you state champion coach, even though it's been a year. State champion coach, Ben Berg from Carmel. Coach, thank you for joining us. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. I always appreciate talking about women's basketball and promoting it and promoting our program.
So, Coach, we like to start everybody off with the opening segment, which we call the opening tip. We kind of have listeners from kind of all over the globe. So maybe just a little bit about your journey and then a little bit of just about maybe about Carmel basketball, Carmel High School, the Mundelein community.
Yeah, I started coaching right out of college in 1987, 88. I actually started in my hometown, which is Sheboygan, Wisconsin. I actually coached for a year up at Sheboygan North, which was actually a crosstown rival of ours. I went to Sheboygan South, moved down to Mundelein in 1988. Actually, my first experience coaching basketball was with boys, and I was a head freshman coach for a couple of years, and then was assistant sophomore coach for a few years, and head sophomore coach then for a few years. And then I was actually the guys varsity coach in the mid 90s. It was 93 through 97. Things didn't go real well, to be honest with you. And I actually stepped away from basketball for about a year or two. Then in 1999, a man named John Ryan, who was actually assistant coach with Doug Bruno at DePaul, took over the women's program at Carmel, and he asked me to be his assistant. So I was assistant for 6 years with John. Took off a couple years again. My kids were young, and then what some people don't know, my wife got sick with cancer. She passed away in 2009. I was actually the head coach for 2 years, so I had to step away because my children were 2, 6, and 7 years old. And then once they got older, in 2017, I was able to come back with them being a little bit older, and I've been here ever since. It's been 7 years, and we've had a little bit of success the last few years, and very much enjoyed myself. Been a football coach for a long time also as well. That's where I kind of first started. Haven't coached football though now. Had a couple of years in Antioch, but I coached at Carmel for over 25 years. So had some success in that as well with some real good teams in the early 2000s.
Yeah, John, we all remember when 2017 when he came back. That's when he started kicking our butts.
Well, and I don't know if you know this, Todd, but when I started in college, they assigned me to Carmel High School to get my very first 10 observation hours, and they put me in this social studies class with this psychology teacher, whose name was Ben Berg. So it's my first observation hours ever were with Coach Berg. So it's a little trivia for the show there for you, Todd.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, I do remember that. That was fun times. So that was good times.
So, Coach, we wanted to kind of talk about your state championship run and all the things that kind of go into it, right? Kind of prepping for each round and, keeping your team even keel, your prep with the staff. And then, as you go on, there's a lot of outside noise. You get a lot of media attention and things like that. So kind of take us through that run and all the things that went into it to finish out as state champions.
To be honest, I've looked at this and thought about a lot of things that happened, and for us, things kind of started already in fall during the pandemic, where we were I thought we were in the best shape or condition of our lives, the group that I had, and that would have been fall of 2020. and we were expecting potentially a season to start. The girls worked extremely hard when we were allowed to, when we were finally allowed to in the fall. As you know, most private schools were hybrid. So, they were partly in school, some of them, and then rotated by the day. But it really started there. And then when we finally got a chance to play in early spring, I think it was around, we had a 5-week season. And a lot of people don't know this. We were 6-10. And most of the girls were fairly young. Out of the 16 teams we played, I bet 14 were ranked teams. It was a tough schedule. And really a lot of our losses, I think 8 of our 10 losses were like 1 or 2 possession losses against senior laden teams that, were very experienced. And we were just kind of figuring out how to finish games. And, the only team that really kind of took it to us twice was Marist. And to be honest with you, that Marist team, and they had Sydney Offalter from who's playing at Iowa now.
Yeah.
That Marist team probably could have went downstate if it wasn't the pandemic that year. I think they would have. They were that good. But I thought coming out of the pandemic, I really thought we had a chance to be really good the next year. We were returning basically everyone except for my daughter Emma, but we're returning everybody else. I thought we had a chance, and I did something I had never done before, and I really hadn't done since then. I actually talked about making it downstate at the banquet, at the end of the banquet. I talked about that, and I talked about really 3 things. I talked about our commitment level. I talked about our trust level between players and coaches, players and players, coaches and players, and then also the parents. I talked about the parents trusting the coaches in what we're going to do. And then one of the biggest things that's permeated over the last 3 or 4 years in the program, I talked about servant leadership and how we serve others. And really, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, we have an inverted leadership model. The coaches serve the players, the seniors and upperclassmen serve the sophomores and the freshmen. And I thought we had really had a good chance to do things. And we had a real good summer, but Jordan Wood, one of our better players, our best player, got hurt. Her along with Grace Sullivan, our 6'4" and 6'5" girls, our 2 best players. Jordan got hurt, so she didn't play all of June with us, but we still were winning games without Jordan. And I knew when we would get her back, we'd be even a different type of team. So we started off at Mundelein, kind of, won that fairly easily. But we got to early December, and this was, I'll never forget this. We played 4 games in basically 5 days. We played Barrington, who took second 4A that year with Sophie Swanson. We played Barrington on a Tuesday at the Lake Zurich Exam Jam. They beat us by like 16. They hit 14 threes. We just did not defend the 3-point line very well. Then we played Nazareth the next night. Actually, I think the Barrington game was on a Monday. We played Nazareth the next night on a Tuesday at home. They beat us by like 16 or 17. And then we played Whitney Young down at the Kenwood Shootout on that Saturday, and they beat us by like 15 or 16. So we lost 3 games in like 5 days or 6 days and got handled. And I'll never forget talking to the girls in the locker room afterwards, and they were kind of dejected. And I kind of thought to myself, where are we going? I knew we were good, but there were some things we had to get better at, and we had to change some things. So after talking to the girls, I decided that next Monday in practice, we were going to change the practice format. And I didn't know if we were a man-to-man team or a zone team, to be quite honest with you. But I decided there and then we were going to play man, and we were going to get better at it. So, and also I thought we needed to be in better condition. I thought we were getting kind of gassed at the end of games. So I changed the whole practice format. What I did is we went 10 or 15 minutes. The first to start a practice was all conditioning, and it was old school stuff: defensive slides, jump and rope, ladder drill, wall sits. And I rotated different things. And I got this name from football. We call it the county fair. That's what I did in college when we did some conditioning things. And then the first 30 or 35 minutes of actually basketball was all defense. And that's all we worked on. And I had about 7 or 8 kind of staple drills that we used, and I rotated. And we probably go over those 7 or 8 over 2 days. We use about 4 or 5 a day, and we got better, and we continue to get better and better, especially on the defensive end of the floor. And really, by the end of the regular season, we were playing our best basketball. As a matter of fact, I think it was after early to mid January, we lost to Marist at home, where we actually, what happened, we had a few people that got COVID, so we only were able to practice twice before we played them. And it was a game that we kind of gave away at the end. And after that, we only lost one game. We lost to Naz in the conference tournament championship. But we just got better and better, especially the last 5 weeks. And I kind of referenced that when they interviewed me downstate. When you look at the conference championship, what a lot of people know, we lost to Naz twice. We lost them by 16 or 17 the first time. Then down there in the conference championship, we lost to them by 11. But one of our kids missed a wide open layup with 2 minutes left. We were down 6. It would have cut it to 4. It could have been a 2-possession game with 2 minutes left. And after that, we had to chase and foul, and it ended up being 11, but it was really a lot closer than that. And what ended up happening is I walked away and I thought, we didn't play very well. And I thought, if we can play them again at some point in time, and we can take care of the ball a little bit better. And I knew it would help us being on a college floor. It's completely different playing against some teams on a college floor. And Naz, with their trapping zone and as physical they are, getting them a college floor kind of spread them out a little bit. And that really helped a lot. So in the conference championship, we actually had, I think it was 19 turnovers. And I think a third of those were live ball turnovers where we gave up layups. In the state championship game, we only had 12. And only one of those was a live ball turnover where they actually scored off of. And then as far as the tournament run's concerned, like I said, we're playing our best basketball. And the girls really started taking ownership of the team. The captains and the rest of the girls really started taking ownership of the team. And the thing we did really well, I thought, we adapted to different styles. So the regional, we faced a couple teams that, we hadn't seen and they hadn't seen us. So we didn't have much of a hard time in the regional. But in the sectional semifinal, we played St. Viator for the 3rd time in 3 weeks.
You don't have to tell me, Coach. You don't have to tell me.
Yeah.
I was there.
Yeah.
We were too happy about that.
Yeah, but the thing about it was you guys play different every single time. So, the first time was more conventional, what you normally do. The second time you pressed us the whole game and rotated girls in and out. And then the last time, which I thought you would do eventually, you played a 2-3 zone and packed everything in and kind of took Sullivan out of the game a little bit. You double teamed her and things like that. I think we ended up winning by 6 or 7 or something like that. It was a fairly close game the whole way. And Joy Bergstrom had a huge game. But I thought we adapted to different styles. And we played Deerfield in the sectional final, and they're all quick guards, low guards, and you got to chase them around. And then you play a team like Sycamore, where they bring like 800 fans to the game. It was like a road game out at Dundee Crown, and they beat Naz earlier in the year, so they only had like 2 losses the whole year. But we played great in that game as well. And really the first 5 games to get downstate, everyone contributed. So, against, Viator, I think Sully only had like 6 points, but Jordan had like 25. And then, in the Sycamore game, they were face guarding Jordan. They were, double teaming Sully. And then Mia Gillis had she had a double. She had like 13 and 12 rebounds. And Anna Hartman had 11 points. And Ashley Schlabowski hit a big 3. So you really have to have everyone contribute in some way when you make a run like that. And I thought when we got down, and that was one of my favorite games because, a lot of people don't know, it was the only time a basketball team from Carmel Catholic had made it downstate, girls or guys. And then when we made it downstate, I thought we had a really good shot when we got teams on a college floor. And then we really pressured the ball a lot better at the end of the year. And with our size on the back end, we made teams drive into our size. And in the state championship game, which, a story a lot of people don't know, when we played NAS in the conference championship game, we got in some foul trouble. So I went to a zone like the last 3 minutes of the half, and we were actually ahead. And Gracie Carsonson hit like 3 threes, like in a matter of like a minute and a half. So it went from like we were leading by like a possession or two, we were down like 6. And I didn't find this out until a month after the state championship game. I guess the kids on the day of the state championship met without the coaches. Now we had a meeting and a film study in the early afternoon, and then we had a short little walkthrough and short little shoot around and stuff. And I don't know if you want to call it a practice that day, but they met, and what they talked about was, if coach wants to go zone at all tonight, we're going to tell him no. We don't want to do that. So this is a true story. So Ashley Shabowski, it's 2 free throws to put us up 43-39. I call a timeout with 11.2 seconds left to try to set the defense and talk about the situation. They were in the bonus. And I asked the girls, I said, do you want to play zone? So then we make them take time. We don't foul them and things like that. All of them said almost in unison, no, we don't want to play zone, coach. I said, okay, let's go. We're going to get out there. We're going to pick them up a little bit earlier, make them take time. Let's defend without fouling. And that's how the game ended. So, and talk about, a pretty cool thing with, the players kind of taking control of what's going on and taking control of the team and the trust that, that they had in me, but also I really had in them was huge at the end of the year.
So I really want to tweak this because I was going to ask you the differences in boys and girls, but we've kind of talked to our guests about this, but I actually have a different take. When you coached boys, when you first took over a boys program, I believe it was 1993, and this year you're going to be coaching in 2024. Can you take our listeners through maybe some of the things that are the same, but maybe some of the things that are different, and maybe how you've adapted as a coach between 1993 and 30 years later in 2024? Because I would have to imagine things are vastly different.
Yeah, it's a lot different. I would say the mentality of a teen boy is not a lot different from what it was, 30 years ago. And guys and girls, how you coach them is different. And when I started coaching with John Ryan in '99, because he coached under Gene Pingatore at St. Joe's, the guys program there. He was a freshman coach there. I said, well, what's the difference? Because I hadn't coached girls before. And he said, well, guys, you need to kind of humble a little bit, and girls, you need to build up. And I think it's kind of similar with that today. Guys, if you tell them, you question a shot or whatever, they'll probably keep shooting. Girls, not so much. I do think things have changed a lot as far as the skill level of the game is better, both guys and girls. And in girls, it's really gotten a lot better in the last just even 7 or 8 years. And it's, you used to be able to take one kid out of the game that could shoot. Now you have multiple kids normally on a lot of good teams that can shoot the ball. So the skill level is just, I think, taken off. And then when I was coaching in the mid '90s, hardly any of the players played travel basketball. It was just a handful or less of the best players. Now pretty much everybody does it to some extent, especially the most serious players. So, but I think one of the things I think is a little bit different too. This is when I was growing up also as well. You kind of went in as a player, and you're kind of taught to trust the coach. You know what I mean? And what the coach is doing. And I think, in today's world a little bit, coaches are questioned a little bit more. And I think you got to earn the players' trust, not the other way around, at least initially. So I do some different things to try to do that and show my players, the girls, that, I care about them as people. I care about them much more beyond just basketball. One of the reasons why, too, I coach a little travel. I get to hang out then with what my girls, when they're playing, I go get to see them play. And I also go to, a lot of the spring sport athletes. I try to get out to see at least one of their games too, as well. But I think, you have to build up a trust, or that they trust you. I think that's really important. And I think that's going to, you look at the state championship team that I talked about, you build that up, and then you can kind of let the players go and take over a little bit more. And that's really what's happened the last 3 years, not just the state championship year, but last year and as well this year. Now, our record wasn't as good this year, but we're competitive and we had a very tough schedule. And the girls walked away feeling good about things. And to me, that's as important as anything.
So something we've talked about with our guests about, and I know Todd, tries to balance this now with young children, but I think you are a great guest to kind of talk about this topic and kind of maybe talk to our listeners about this topic. Is balancing life as a father with your own children, and basically a father with other people's children, whether it's football or girls basketball or boys basketball, and to be honest, Coach, you kind of referenced it, especially with a wife who was sick and has since passed away. What do you, and maybe this is a lesson for our listeners. What are things you would say to our listeners that are coaches and very involved, that may have young children, on how to balance it and how to raise your children, but also, give your program the best version of you?
Yeah, I think you got to look at, one, if you have to have a spouse that's very understanding, because you're going to be away a lot, and you guys know basketball is the longest season by far, and you also are gone during Thanksgiving some, gone during Christmas some, so during the holidays, so you have to have a spouse and children too that are understanding about that, which I did have in my wife Jen, and my kids have been very understanding and supportive of my coaching. And so you have to have that. I look at it too. It's not going to be normal, like, other maybe dads or fathers. Now, I'm fortunate enough, all my kids went to, I teach at Carmel, so they all went to high school with me. So they drove with me every morning. So I was able to spend, those 30-minute rides to and 30 minutes back from school. So that was some extra time that maybe some fathers don't get or parents get, which I valued very much with my kids. I look at, it's got to be quality over quantity sometimes. And what's hard, I think, as a coach, and what I've gotten a lot better at, I try not to take things home with me, like take the losses and stuff home with me. I try to leave it at the door or leave it back at the gym. And I think I've done a much better job of doing that, especially in the last handful of years. But when you have an opportunity to spend time with your children, be attentive, be engaged, and try to be the best you can be. And obviously, it's going to be different. A coaching life is different. There's a lot of long hours. You're going to be gone till late at night sometimes, especially game night. So you have to have some understanding from your children and from your spouse. But like I said, our quality over quantity, and be engaged when you are with them. And then, you want to do the things that they like to do, not necessarily all the things that you like to do. So, but it's hard. And sometimes, to be quite honest, I don't know if I do a great job all the time. I try, but I try to be aware when I'm not, and try to do as much as I can to spend that time when I have it with my children.
So, this is called halftime adjustments, and it kind of just popped up. Didn't quite know. Sometimes I just kind of go with the flow and see what the conversation goes. But you mentioned in that state run playing those different styles, right? Like you said, when I was if we would have had to play you a 4-time coach, I don't even know what we would have done something crazy, right? But how did you kind of prepare your team to not really change so much of what you're doing, but adjust to those styles, right? I mean, you guys, I'm sure along the way you're playing really good teams too, but like I'm sure you guys saw some stuff. People are trying things because you guys were really, really good. And you know, sometimes it's hard not to be like, oh, well, we're gonna put this new thing in and this in. So how did you kind of prepare your team to be able to adjust to those different things and the things you did and whatever it may be in your concepts and what you were doing that season?
Well, we had great players. Let's be honest. We had some great players, and all five of the girls and the first girl coming off the bench are all playing in college. Um, and Grace Sullivan just transferred to Northwestern. Jordan's at Duke. Mia Gillis and Schlabowski are going to be at UW Whitewater. Anna Hartman's a Division I soccer player, and then Kyla Smith coming off the bench is playing at Trinity Christian in Palos Heights. So we had really good players. That's the first thing. It starts there, and they have a lot of competitive spirit. They wanted to win. What I think has helped me a lot in my basketball journey is my football background. I was an offensive line coach, and I was an OC for 8 years. There's a lot of detail in that, and as much film as I watched for basketball, I watched so much more film in football. You only have one game a week, and you're watching film of practice every single day, and so much film of opponents. And then after your game on Fridays, that Saturday morning, and we'd grade film and we do things like that. So film study was key for myself and for the girls, to get them prepped for all the different styles that we're going to see. And then kind of always staying a step ahead. So in knowing maybe earlier on in the tournament that we could maybe look at one more opponent ahead and maybe implement one or two things in practice. So, but I've always thought in the tournament to me is the fun time. That's the fun time during the year, because you can focus mostly on just one team. And, and we did some different things with all the opponents we had. Like we did, like you guys ran so many different ball screens with Nora and with Joy, and we covered them different ways. And our girls had enough basketball IQ to do those things. Against Sycamore, we literally didn't cover a kid. That's what we did. So we had kind of a different approach, especially on defense. What helped us, quite frankly, in offense, I don't know if a lot of people knew this, but in a 7-game tournament run, we ran no plays. We didn't run one set play in 7 games. Now, you need 3 big girls that can all score and pass and are unselfish. And that's what we had. All 3 of those girls were unselfish, and they could all pass the ball. They could all read things. We ran a triangle offense, and the triangle offense we ran against a zone a lot of times, or a man-to-man. And there were some tweaks and adjustments in it, but we ran basically similar type of concepts. And, and when you can do that and do it against a zone or a man, and you have, 3 players with the kind of size they had, but the skill level that they had, that makes things a lot easier when you don't have to do a lot of different things and run a lot of sets. And that's what we did. And again, we didn't run one single play throughout the whole tournament, which was, I don't know if that's happened before. I don't know, but we just didn't. That's who we were. So, and we played old school. We played inside out, which is a lot different for probably teams that prepare for us. Downstate, we hit 2 threes against Civic Memorial in the semifinal. And 1 3 was actually when the game was basically over. And we only hit 1 3 in the state championship game. So we were literally, we were a throwback team. So we were old school. So, but offensively, we did similar things against a zone or man. And we made those adjustments on defense based on the teams that we're playing against. And film study was huge for myself and for the girls as well.
All right. Well, first, we're giving Todd way too many offensive compliments on his team, so we have to move off that.
Listen, I was just trying to help out where I can. Jay did a lot of that work. So
But I do have an interesting follow before we get into the second half of the show and leadership. You know, you talked about your time as a football coach, and I've often thought about this, and you talked about your time as an offensive coordinator. Do you feel like basketball coaches could learn from the way football coaches use their assistants and the specialization and the offensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator and the special teams? Do you feel that there's any correlation at all between something basketball can take from football?
I do. I think there's so much more detail in football that people don't really realize. I coach offensive linemen, so I knew and I graded every single play for every single guy. So, if you weren't stepping 6 inches and you were stepping 8 inches in your first step, I knew it. So I think it heightens your attention to detail. And sometimes I actually worry with the girls. Sometimes, am I giving them too much information? And sometimes I'll ask them that, am I giving you too much stuff? Because basketball is such a reactionary sport. You don't want them to overthink either, but you want to prepare them. And for me, and kind of off on a tangent a little bit, for me was always a challenge. I coach offensive line guys. And if you don't know anything about offensive line guys, they're probably some of the more unselfish guys on the team. They never touch the ball. They get a boatload of the blame when things don't go well, and they don't get a heck of a lot of credit when things go well. And that's kind of what they signed up for. So to go to that and to basketball was always an interesting transition for me, in that you had to get 5 people to plan selfishly and share the ball and play their role. And, I always thought if I could do that, and what I thought with that state championship team, I had several coaches come up to me downstate. Hey, congratulations, coach. Really loved watching your team play. And I felt those girls played the right way. They shared the ball. There was never they didn't care who scored, it was kind of like an offensive lineman's mentality, in the fact that, we didn't care. We're just going to play our role, do our thing. And the outcome, the result was the most important thing. But yeah, I think attention to detail and some of the things, doing things for the betterment of the whole instead of the individual, which, basketball can be an individual sport sometimes, but to win at the highest level, it can't be. You have to count on the other people that are with you. And that's a must. And that's why basketball, I think, is a great team sport. And in some ways, football might be the ultimate team sport, because all 11 players got to be doing the right thing at the right time to be successful. So I do take some things from football, and I think it does translate. And I think, yeah, you can learn some things from that. And I did learn some things with basketball. And when I go back to some of my memories and some of the things I learned in football.
So as we kind of go into the second half, we focus on a topic, as all our guests know, with each guest. And for you, we've never really focused on leadership development for players and coaches. So we are going to focus on the topic of leadership, and you kind of very small touched on it to start the show, but so the first kind of part of this, and there's going to be 4 or 5 parts of this, is developing that player leadership. You talked about servant leadership, but how do you go about teaching the actual skill of leadership? In thinking about things like accountability and discipline and the things that go into being a servant leader. Kind of take our guests through how you develop that player leadership.
Well, and I've learned some different things over the last 4 or 5 years, and this is why. I mean, John, I've talked to you a little bit about this, in some side conversations. I choose my captains in the spring already, and now all 3 of my captains for next year are all spring sport athletes, so we can't meet as much right now, but we're going to start meeting in May. And I always pick a leadership book out. That's what we do, and we read it. And we discuss different things, and we kind of go, a few chapters at a time. Now, the book that I've gone back to, and this is a book, it's a great leadership book. It's called The Twin Thieves There's actually a training guide to it also as well. So what we do, we'll read, a few chapters, are actually very short chapters. We usually read 4 or 5. And then we go through the questions that are in, and it's all situational things. We go through the things that are in the chapters, the questions that are from the chapters, and we'll probably, do it once a week or once bi-weekly. So we'll have a good base for what we want to do come June when camp starts. And we continue to do it through or into the fall. And really, I think it's a misperception a little bit by coaches that, a senior is going to know how to lead. I don't necessarily believe that. I think they have to learn how to lead. Now, one of the things I wanted this year, we had 3 great leaders this year: Kira Ackerson, Ashley Schlabowski, and Anna Hartman. Now, all 3 of them are a part of that state championship team, and they all learned from players older than them. But I told them, I said, your greatest legacy is not going to be a state championship. That is in the history book. That'll never be forgotten. But your greatest legacy is going to be what you teach these younger players and how they approach things and how they treat people. And like I said at the banquet, you can tell something about a program and how the seniors treat the freshmen. And that's why I wanted the young girls around these 3 as much as possible, because they are tremendous young people. They serve others without questioning, and they do it on their own. I mean, I don't really have to prompt things, but I'll start meeting with the captains, in spring, and we'll do it throughout the summer, throughout the fall. This past year, what we started, and it's a book called, I use another book with the group this year. It's called What Drives Winning Teams. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of a guy named Brett Ledbetter before. He's an author. He's worked with Gonzaga. He worked with the Iowa women's team and Caitlin Clark. Actually, he worked with personally. There's some YouTube clips on their conversation and his interview with her. But what we started doing in the fall, and we continued throughout the year, we call them PGMs. It stands for Personal Growth Monday. And we had topics that we chose, that I chose sometimes, but we had the 3 captains break the team up into 3 smaller groups. And then I kind of let them go. And what they did, they would discuss it in their small groups. Then we'd come together in a big group. And one of the reasons we did that is, people are more likely to talk in a smaller group and not feel threatened at all. And everyone got a voice. Everyone, talked or had a responsibility that they had to do. So, I think starting, earlier, to me, that's key, and not doing it right at the beginning of the season. And then constant communication with the captains. And, I send probably a text or 2 every week, even now, about leadership quotes or, something that I think that would resonate with them, that talks about serving others. And, a great example, we went down to the Purdue team camp in late June, and Kira Ackerson, our senior captain, didn't have to be told this. She just did it. Every time we went to one of the venues, she carried the first aid kit. She carried the basketballs. Every time we left the venue, she carried the first aid kit. She carried the basketballs. So for a senior to do that and not be told to do that, and then for the younger girls to see her doing that, I think these younger girls are going to be appreciative of just hanging out with these older girls and what they taught them this year. And that's going to be their greatest legacy. So choosing as captains early, I think, is key. And then continuing to develop things and remind them of what's important. And I talked about it before, that inverted leadership model. Coaches serve the players, the upperclassmen, the seniors serve the others, the upperclassmen serve the sophomores and the freshmen. And it's a great thing. And I saw, yesterday, one of our freshman players that was on the varsity, and she did some things in talking to a potential incoming 8th grader that might be there, that did a shadow day. And just the way she was talking, I'm thinking, wow, she really learned a lot from our senior leaders this year. So it was pretty cool to see.
So before I go to the next one, I'm gonna follow a little bit. So obviously you've been there a long time, you've had time to develop this. But say, I mean, you know as well as I do, and John does, there's so many changes of coaches and people going different places. And so say you were just starting from scratch, right? You have your kind of system in place, but you're not knowing these kids as well. You've obviously talked to them, had conversations with them, but you're starting, just coming into a program. Where would you start on the leadership aspect with your players?
Well, first thing I would do it, I'd get to know the parents too a little bit, and one thing, the advantage I have is in what I do, I actually work with our feeder girls some directly with them. I don't let parents do it and stuff like that. And then they get to know who I am before they even get to the school. And feeders kind of change for us, but everywhere it's a little bit different. But I think to get to know those kids before they even get there, when they're inside your walls, whether it be camp in the summer, shadow days that they're doing, I think is key. And building some sort of, small relationship with their parents before they get there. And I always said this, I look for three things in a player. And this is off topic a little bit. I look for a player that loves basketball. I look for a player that when they come to our school, they love Carmel Catholic High School. And I look for players that love the program. And if you can find players like that, you can have a lot of success. But I'd say for the coach that's just starting off, get to know the parents too a little bit, get to know your players, and then probably to start with, do some icebreaker things, some team bonding things with the coach there and maybe with the coach not being there. And one of the other things that we do before the season starts, we do a lock-in. It's a team activity thing where they actually sleep over at the school and we'll have mass the next morning. I have a friend of mine I used to coach with, Mike Fitzgibbons, used to be the head coach and head of campus ministry at Carmel. He does a lock-in for us. He's done it the last few years, and the kids have a blast. But you really find out some things that the coaches just observe, really. But I think get to know those players, do some ice-breaking things first, and then if it's before the season, that lock-in I think really helps us a lot. They come together during that. And once you get to know them, selecting the captains, I think, is key. And there's different ways of doing it. I talked to John. He's done it both ways. He allows sometimes has allowed the players to select it, and he's selected himself. I think for me, it's whatever you feel comfortable with. But I think the sooner when you can identify the kids that are leaders a little bit and work with them, I think it starts with you. But really, if you want the team to take over, it's the captains that are going to permeate the things that you want. And eventually, and I've been very fortunate to have some really good leaders and really good people that it's really been a lot less work the last couple of years for me. And I kind of just, I'm more guiding them. I'm not really directing them anymore. And I think to get to know the parents a little bit, do some icebreaker team activity things. And, if it's before the season, a lock in, that was key for us. And then when you can identify those captains and start working with them, and, like I've used different books, those are the two that we've used the last few years, but there's others as well.
So now let's talk about like the team aspect, right? We live in a society that's very individualistic, instant gratification, right? So at times, right, it's hard for young kids to see the team picture, right? They're thinking, oh, I didn't score a lot of points, or I didn't play well, or I've even mentioned this a couple times lately. It used to be that a kid makes a mistake and all you had to worry about was the coach kind of getting on you, right? Now it's everywhere, right? And you got keyboard warriors saying stuff to you and things like that. So how do you get the individuals to buy in for the greater good of the team, and that balance of individual development and growing players, but meshing it with the team?
I think that's one of the hardest things, to get kids to buy into roles and what their roles are. And I don't think it's something that you can say right at the beginning of the year, this is it. I think it evolves over time and it's a constant thing. And for me, it's having micro conversations with, each individual player and where they're at. To me, I always talk about over communicating rather than the other way around. Because sometimes maybe kids don't know or don't understand. So I think communication is key. And I've done it different ways. Sometimes in July, I meet with them after summer and tell them where they're at and what they do well, what they need to work on. I've met with them before the season in the fall, and then throughout the season sometimes too. Now that's not as easy, but I think over communication is key. Um, and then to get to buy into that, that's hard. And every particular group and team is a little bit different. Like, we played a different style too this year, so it was a little bit more equal opportunity. Now, one of the things, I'm a big on motion where you share the ball, and I constantly talk about in practice what are great shots, what's a great 3-point shot, and I try to teach them in practice on a daily basis. We give up good shots to take great shots, and why we do that. And, something, I've said before in the past too, when you win, when you're successful like that, everybody gets noticed. And, everybody eats. That's what we talk. Everybody eats. When you win at the highest level, everyone gets noticed. And I tell kids that are younger, if your goal is to play college basketball, that's one of your goals, I will try to do everything I can to help you achieve that. I don't give out the scholarships. I don't know, what level you'll be at, but I'll try to help you any way I can. And I think when the players know you're in their corner in that way, I think they're more willing to buy in also. And obviously trust is a big thing, and they got to trust you. So, and that's not saying all the players have bought in all the time. Like I said, I've been lucky to last, especially 3-4 years where they have. But I think having those constant micro conversations throughout the year, maybe meeting in the summer and then once in the fall to kind of tell them where they're at, and then defining roles for kids. Luckily, running motion a little bit, the ball shared a little bit more. We didn't run a lot of set plays. Now this year we ran a few more sets. And one of the reasons is we had to put some of our scorers in position, and the girls bought into that. They knew that. But again, you have to have those conversations all the time and over communicate, don't under communicate, because they may not know, because they're being told by, mom or dad or someone else, their trainer or whatever, you should be scoring this amount of points, this amount of points, and this amount of points. So, and I try to also tell them college coaches look at other things. They don't just look at that. And one thing they look at a lot, the real good ones, they look at your behavior before games on the bench, how you warm up, all those things are important. And as important sometimes as some other things.
Well, I'm stealing when we win, everyone gets noticed, just so you know. I already wrote that down, so I'm stealing that. So let's kind of tweak it. We kind of talked about player development. Let's kind of and leadership. Let's talk about your assistants. This is something important to me, is growing my assistants, especially my younger assistants, but even my older assistants. I really push my staff to grow themselves. So how do you get, possibly a younger assistant and develop them as an individual coach? I know for a fact that you've had individuals that were younger coaches that have turned into head coaches. Yeah, I'm sure we could reference one or two for sure. But how do you help them feel ownership? How do you help them become better leaders? How do you kind of develop now those coaches as leaders, not just the players?
Well, I have exit meetings with the coaches too, not just the players. I have those exit meetings and to see where they're at in their journey. And I try to ask them, what's your short-term goal 1 to 2 years from now? What's your long-term goal 5 to 7 years from now? Do you want to be a head coach someday? And if you do, let's set out a plan so I can help you get to what you want to achieve. I always invite all my coaches to anything they want to go to. And I encourage them to do clinics in the spring, and a lot of clinics are online too now. But I encourage them to come to varsity practices when they can. Obviously, I have them around in the summer as much as possible at camps, not only to help out, but to work with me more individually. And then I'll meet with them sometimes in the fall. We'll have, 2-3 coaches meetings where we go over, more schematic things and then some logistic things. But I think to support them, encourage them, and one thing to be themselves, and that my staff the last few years have been great. State championship year, we had a lot of strong personalities, but to give them all a role is really important. And I'm learning that too as well. To give them responsibilities is really important. And I think to listen is really important, and to know that and I always talk about too. Every coach should have their core 3 of coaches that they call on, but you should also have with your assistants a role that they play. Like state championship year, Steve Pratt was our skills coach. Karen Stack, who's now at Northwestern, she met with the girls individually during the year with film study. I was more organizational thing, offense and defense. We had another guy who was just Brian Gillis, was just our rebounding coach, and he'd actually watch over the girls to make sure that they were staying on task before games and engaged before games. So, you give each assistant a role. This year I had a coach named Tim Bonero, who was a Carthage coach for the longest time. And they were running 5-out stuff at Carthage for the last handful of years. And, we had to start doing that. So I gave him the offense. And it would be foolish of me to think, that he couldn't coach just the offense when he's been a college coach for 30 years and a women's coach for 20 years, head women's coach for 20 years. And Tylee Resetich, my other assistant, she did all the skill work and practice. So it actually lightens up my load too, where I can see different things. Because I'll tell you what, if you think you're going to see everything as a head coach, you're just not. And you have to give them some roles and responsibilities. I think that's important. And it's actually, they'll be more invested, and they're going to become a better coach, and they're going to want to do more. So I think that's important.
So I completely agree. First of all, I delegate all my skill work to my assistants, but I wanted to hit on something real quick before we go on to the last question of the second half of the show, which was, you mentioned the core 3. Can you just expand on that? I when you said that, I was a little bit intrigued. Can you just expand what you mean?
Yeah, and I tell my kids this too. Have your 3 or 5 people that when you don't know something, you want to reflect and ask questions, you don't have the answers, you can call them. They're on your cell. So I say that with coaches too. I don't have the answers to everything. And the older I get, I think I know less. So and I'm constantly wanting to try to learn different things. I went up to work the Whitewater camp specifically to see. I mean, they're a national power in Division III. I want to see how they do things. And whether it's something I can steal things. And obviously, the best coaches, you're stealing from each other all the time, right? But here's the thing: I think you have to have those 3 coaches that you trust. That if you're unsure about something, it doesn't have to be just basketball schematics or X's and O's, that you can call on. That you can maybe get some answers, or you can bounce some ideas off them and see what they think. And I think that's important, that you have that, no matter how old you get, no matter how experienced you are, to have that group of maybe 3 at least, maybe more, that you can count on and call. And I have that, and I've been very fortunate to work with a lot of really, really good coaches, not just in basketball but in football, and Hall of Fame coaches that I've learned a lot from. And I've stole a lot from and taken from. And if it applies and works for your program, we're the better for it. But I think that's important. You have that group that you can call on.
Well, I guess, Todd, I guess you're a part of my Fab 5 of people I call on. So just remember that you're in a Fab 5 now.
I got to wear extra baggy shorts and some sweet Nikes. All right, I'm in. So Coach, like, I guess just to kind of to wrap it all up here before we get to our next 2 segments, you mentioned the books you use, but what other outside resources do you use? I guess ways to recommend, like, just diving into the leadership aspect and developing your plan.
Well, I try as much as I can to to watch video too on whether it be YouTube or whatever. I mean, this What Drives Winning Teams, Ledbetter has all these different interviews with Brad Stevens, with Gino Auriemma, Caitlin Clark, Mark Few from Gonzaga. So I try to, plug into those things as much as possible. And then and that's one reason why I'm kind of looking at travel. I just look how different coaches do different things. And I think, you're not going to use everything, obviously. And I always used to look at, like, when I went to a football clinic, like, we do our stuff, but if I can get one or two drills or one or two concepts, then it's worthwhile to me. So I try to pick up anything anywhere I can, whether it be basketball, X and O's, or leadership things. I'm just going back to, the book we used 2 years ago because it works so well, and these girls haven't read it yet. So I'll go back to that, but I'm sure I'm going to tweak a few things. We're going to stay with our PGMs because it works so well. But I always think you got to tweak, besides, basketball stuff, you got to tweak 20% of stuff every year to keep things fresh. And, not leadership stuff, but one thing I did this year, we were a little bit short as far as our bench, and we only went an hour and a half practice almost a whole year. And, we never went 2 hours. And then we implemented yoga once a week on Tuesdays. And then once a week we did recovery day, where we did just basically shooting and stretching and rolling out our legs and getting in the ice whirlpool. That's something I never done before. But this particular group needed that. So I'm always looking to tweak everything, and I take on all comers. I think we're going to do some similar things this year, but I'm going to tweak something. I'm not sure quite yet what it'll be, but our 3 captains are brand new. None of them have been a captain before. So I'm going to have to work hard with them on their skills and kind of get them to step out of their comfort zone a little bit to lead the girls. So that'll be important.
That's definitely something huge to me. Every Friday we do recovery, yoga, meditation. That's a big thing for me. So I'm glad you brought that up. So as we go into our last 2 segments, the first one we call 30-second timeout. It's kind of your opportunity to talk about whatever topic you want, your program or something important to you or your family or a topic you want to discuss, or turn the tables on Todd and I and ask us a question. And as we joke with all of our guests, it's a loose 30 seconds. There's no referee in your timeout telling you you got to end the timeout. So kind of the floor is yours.
I just, what we do, I don't know if it's unique at all. I'd like to ask you guys actually a question. What sort of leadership things do you do with your players? What are a few things that you guys do? I'd like to learn from you guys.
So I'm going to actually hit on something we do that I kind of talked about in a coach's roundtable Todd and I were at. But I'm going to make it a little bit more specific to situational learning. With our team, with situations, we will give the kids situations, and my coaches and we don't coach our situational stuff. I will give them the situation, a minute 10 to go, you're down 3, the team fouls are this, you have this many timeouts, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll break them up into 2 groups, and I kind of let them handle the situation. And sometimes afterwards we'll reflect, and sometimes we won't. And that's something that's been big to me, because I think a lot of times, as coaches, at least this is something I used to do that I learned from, is kind of micromanaging the situations in practice, and then they get in the game and they're not really sure how to handle the situations. And something I really learned from and reflected on, and actually I was so proud of, was this year in a regional championship game. We found ourselves in a situation, and I think a lot of teams, we had lost our best player. She was out with an injury. We had lost our second best player. She was out with an injury. We had lost them both mid-game. And one of my kids in a timeout with about 45 seconds to go, actually looked at her teammates and looked at all the kids on the court and said, "Guys, we did this before. Remember when we did so-and-so situation, and this is how we did it?" And I really think that was how I really think that's how the kids learn best. most of the time when we do these situations, most probably our listeners will laugh, you guys will laugh, is I actually just play the referee. And let my coaches just sit and watch and let the kids learn and talk to each other. And sometimes I'll give them both whiteboards, and let them talk through and figure out the situation. And sometimes I learn stuff from them to see what they draw up and what they run and what they trust. And I think that's a big thing we've done, especially situationally, to develop them as leaders and develop their basketball IQ. Sorry, Todd, I feel like I talked a lot there.
That's a dangerous strategy to be the referee. Your own players are the
Oh,
most
I love
ruthless
when they
ones.
yell at me.
They're
It's
the
a
most
great time.
ruthless ones whenever I referee it. They're
It's a
like,
great time.
listen, you know, I obviously don't have as much experience as you guys, but I've been, what I've been thinking about a lot is like providing our players with experiences of different things in different situations, to kind of develop that perspective as a leader. Because I think a lot of times you're in a community, you're in a situation, and you kind of think everybody's the same. But, at times you don't really know what people are going through. Like, unfortunately, one of our players, a Benedictine's father, passed away this summer, and, we all went up there, but it was so good to see the support and the good stories and the conversations that were had with not only our players, but family members and things like that. And I think, a lot of times people aren't willing to step out of their comfort zone, right? They're in their little box and it's hard to step out of your comfort zone. So having experiences and things like that, and then coming back and kind of talking about it and having those conversations about it gives a little bit different perspective. And I think that's a good start building on leadership. So, all right, now this is where we get less serious.
Very less serious.
Very less serious, right? And we go quick hitters. And just kind of rapid fire questions, answer anywhere you want. We might add one here along the way, but your favorite historical leader.
Gandhi.
Oh, okay. I did
Like
not think you were going to go there. All right, so I have some family that lives in Mundelein, so I'm actually curious of this answer. This is a very fun question. What's maybe a hidden gem or a really good place to eat in Mundelein?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt about this. It's Emo's and Mundelein. I
Okay.
mean, they have great pizza, but their sandwiches are great. Their pulled pork is superb.
Very good.
Your favorite off-season activity to do with your kids.
As much as we can, we try to travel. I didn't do it a lot as a kid, and I know they love doing it. A couple of years ago, we actually had a chance to go to Greece, so that was pretty
That's
cool.
awesome.
What was your favorite part of Greece?
I just, because I taught world history at one time too. I teach, obviously psychology and the social sciences now, but just seeing all the historical artifacts, stuff I taught about, actually seeing it in person, and then really meeting the people. And it just brought me back to we're really lucky here in the United States. And a lot of people don't know that. You got to travel the world to kind of know that. We got it pretty good. So.
All right, if you weren't a teacher and a coach, you would have been blank.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think something with like forensic psychology.
Awesome. All right. Favorite new trend in basketball.
I've always been kind of a numbers guy too, so I like analytics now more, and I've heard different coaches talk about what they use, and like points per possession is one of the things that Coach Pinero talked a lot more this year than I ever really used before. So I think the analytics of the game is always interesting to me, and what people look at to be successful.
And then finally, what's something you see changing or adding into the game in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I don't, with the high school game, it's a little bit different. Obviously, they changed the rule on free throws this year to quarters. Um, and this isn't new, but I think in the state of Illinois, I'd be surprised within 5 years if we don't have the shot clock. I think that's something that's coming. We went to a tournament a couple of years ago and used it, and really didn't make that much of a difference where we noticed it. But I think that'll be one thing. And for me, just schematically, we played 32 games this year. 26 were against teams that played zone. It seems like more teams are playing zone, and I have some theories on why that is. But it'll be interesting to me to see if that continues to be the trend.
Coach, we can't thank you enough. This was an awesome episode. A lot of great insight. I know I'm going to have to go back and listen and write. Couldn't write down fast enough the things that you were saying. Especially on the leadership front, because I think a lot of times it's all X's and O's, but there's more to the game and more to coaching. Thank you so much for joining us. It was awesome to talk to you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you having me, and I'd be on anytime if you'd have me. So thanks much.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast in partnership with the IBCA. Please be sure to rate us on whatever platform you are listening and give us a 5-star rating. For more show content and updates, please follow us on Twitter at After the Timeout. As always, thank you for listening. Tune in next time for more content on the court, off the court, and anything in between.